So we've talked about what HITRUST certification means, and the overall picture in terms of why it's becoming more and more important. So obviously, the next question is, how difficult is it for a company to achieve their very first assurance or certification? And I'm wondering, Brian, if you want to take that one, and then we can go around the table, because Brian, I know you consult with a lot of firms who are looking to get certified and show these assurances, right?
Okay, of course. I mean, that's a loaded question on how difficult it is. I mean, there's obviously a lot of factors, a lot of scoping that goes into it. But every single organization probably has a lot of the same questions or same issues that they're going to face. Is there buy-in from leadership? Are they going to provide all the needed resources to meet the standard? What's the current maturity of the security program? Are they open to making changes? Is there a lot of red tape to actually change policies, add new technology? Of course, one of the biggest things is what standard are you actually, or certification are you trying to achieve? For instance, if you're going after HITRUST, generally there's a lot more work that needs to be done than going for, say, ISO 27001. A lot of that goes back to what Michael had said earlier on the assess once, report many, where some of your other certifications or assurances are focused in one area, where HITRUST covers an umbrella, and we kind of align a lot of our clients to there. But the biggest difficulty that I see from being on the readiness side is the scope creep. As I mentioned, there's different certifications, and then there's also just nice security practices that companies want to do, or boards that want to do, that don't really adhere to any particular certification. And so there's just this constant scope creep. I want to add this, I want to add that, I want to add this. I'm going to do some ISO 27001 with sprinkling in some GDPR or sprinkling in some HITRUST, and it gets unmanageable. So with any scope creep project, it becomes unruly time-wise and resource-wise. So the difficulty really is as strong as your program management skills. As we've talked about the entire day, choose a certification. Let's all be on the same page. If we're trying to be certified, I care about security, but that is just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. Certifications, I love them because it's black and white. The standard is there. Just run down there. Yes, no, can I do this? So to try to avoid any of that scope creep. So project management is I would say the difficult part, Paddy, to, on how difficult it is for a client to get certified.
Howard, are you still with us?
Yes, I still am.
Yep. Would you like to take that on? What's your perspective on this? How long does it take? How difficult is it? Comment on that.
Not to put too fine a point, but I did have hair at the beginning of the process when we got our first HITRUST. In terms of and I think Brian said, it is a management commitment to go through the process, and not in terms of technological is there, but it is project resources required to do it properly, because there's a lot of elements to it, and especially going for the first time, it's very extensive and a lot of pieces to that. And it was really more an exercise of sort of gathering a lot of information, like in terms of it's not hard if you sort of done it right and understood from the development of the product or the platform. In our particular case, security was upmost to begin with. So it was not as much of going, oh my God, we didn't do this. It was just more, frankly, it was more the documentation of it and the process involved. It was still a long process. I think for us, it was still good 18 months probably on the first run, just to go through it all. Like now in terms of the annual renewals, it's much more straightforward. But especially for that first time, because there's just a lot of pieces to it. And it's like undoing an onion. You sort of realize there's more and more levels that you've got to go through. Be honest, what's really helpful is making sure you've got good auditors to work with. I think that made a huge difference for us as well. We did a lot of research as to the various auditors, and I think the auditors make a big, big difference in going through in going through it all, especially the initial assessment, so you have an idea of really what you're going to be dealing with. But it is a commitment, and there is a group of us who have survivors of our first HITRUST audit that get together on a regular basis, and we tell stories.
Yeah. Paddy,
so Michael, I'm sure you have a perspective on this.
Yeah. So I've got a unique perspective. Obviously, I'm with HITRUST, but prior to being here, I ran the HITRUST practice for PwC globally, right?
Oh,
So I did everything and anything HITRUST related. So I've been in Brian's seat, right, as an assessor, as a consultant for many different years. So I look at it through two different lenses. A good friend of mine who works for an assessor organization, the way that he describes HITRUST is it's a significant emotional event. And I think that probably aligns to what Howard was talking about, right? Or at
yes.
least the first time through. And when you break that down, not to get philosophical here for a second, but I think it's actually a really good way to describe it. It doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom. And the reason being is that I think it forces collaboration within organizations, doesn't matter what size it is, across different stakeholder groups that you traditionally wouldn't get through other compliance or assurance related activities, right? By design. So if you're having to do a quote unquote HIPAA assessment, maybe there's a HIPAA officer. A lot of times it's just owned by privacy with maybe throwing a few things over the fence to security, but it's very siloed, right? If you're doing something like a SOC report, a lot of times that may be in the finance realm. If it's a SOC 1, if it's the SOC 2, obviously it would be with information security. What a certification effort does for an organization, HITRUST being one of those, is I think it breaks down those barriers and brings people together, as quirky as that sounds, to really address the common goal of achieving the certification. The other thing that does is I think it helps organizations identify areas of duplication that exists within their own organization as it relates to compliance related activities. It doesn't mean it's easy. Frankly, it's not designed to be easy. And I think Howard, really said it best, which is this is not a one-time activity. If you're going to do this right, you need to feed it, you need to water it, you need to nurture it over a period of time. And you see that as foundational components to our own programs, right? I mean, our framework is always changing. We get a lot of complaints. Why are you guys releasing another update? Well, if we weren't doing that, we wouldn't be relevant. The threat landscape is constantly changing. And the underlying authoritative sources are constantly changing. When's the last time NIST or ISO was updated, right? To be relevant, if you will. That's something that we really take seriously and to heart. Other things that I think are important to note as to why it may be more difficult than other certifications is because there's different data sets that you're providing transparency over. So if you look at this concept of the PRISMA scoring model, that gives you additional transparency into the maturity of your programs that you don't get through other assurance mechanisms, right? For example, SOC report, it's either exception noted, no exception noted, very black. What we do through our PRISMA scoring model is to give credit for aspects of, for example, measuring and monitoring of programs. One of the questions I had come up was around, for example, a bounty program, right? So what are you doing around bug bounty? We actually have a lot of organizations that have bug bounty programs in place, and that's a good indication that they are measuring and managing their programs overall from a maturity perspective, right? Something that we support within the marketplace. So I think there's a lot to consider when you determine what certification path you're going to go down. But again, I go back to assess once, report many. If you're going to make an investment, do it across the organization, try and satisfy as many demands that you have all at once.